Elijah Callaway was 43 years old, a private equity principal who had spent 18 years evaluating other people's ideas and deciding, with the kind of precision that either made him very good at his job or very difficult at dinner parties, exactly what they were actually worth. He drove a 7-year-old sedan. He wore the same watch he had owned since his late 20s, a plain automatic. No complications, nothing that needed to be explained. He had learned early that the people who needed to announce their success usually hadn't finished building it yet. On a Tuesday afternoon in late February, a man walked into Elijah's firm's conference room on the 11th floor with a pitch deck, a firm handshake, and the specific, confident energy of someone who believed the meeting was going to go well. His name was Brandon Cole. He was 36 years old, and he was asking for $2, $4 million in seed capital for a logistics software company he had been building for 14 months. He did not know who he was sitting across from. Neither did Elijah. Not yet. What he found out in the next 47 minutes would cost Brandon everything and give Elijah the clearest picture he had looked at in years. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The conference room smelled like fresh coffee and dry erase marker, the particular combination that meant the previous meeting had just ended and the room hadn't fully reset yet. Elijah had been in this room 10,000 times. He knew its dimensions without measuring them. He sat with his back to the window because the afternoon light came in from the west and he preferred not to squint. He had a yellow legal pad in front of him. A pen, no laptop. He had learned that founders read a laptop as multitasking and multitasking as indifference. He gave every pitch his full attention. Not because he was polite, because he was expensive, and full attention was what he was there to provide. Elijah Callaway had grown up in a house in Memphis where money was something you counted at the end of the month to see if there was any left. His father drove a delivery truck for 31 years and never once complained about it, which Elijah had understood, even as a teenager, to be a form of dignity that cost more than it looked like. He had gone to the University of Tennessee on academic scholarship, studied finance, graduated second in his class, and taken a job at a small investment firm in Atlanta that no one had heard of, and that was, he would later understand, exactly the right place to learn how money actually worked when it wasn't performing for an audience. He had spent 12 years at that firm and 3 more building his own. Callaway Capital was not large by the standards of the industry. It was precise. It did 9 to 12 deals a year. Its track record over 11 years was the kind that did not need to be explained because the numbers explained themselves. It occupied 2 floors in a Buckhead office building and employed 14 people, every one of whom Elijah had interviewed personally, most of whom he had hired because they asked better questions than the other candidates. He drove the 7-year-old sedan because it had never given him a reason to stop driving it. He wore the watch because it kept accurate time. He was not interested in the performance of success. He was interested in success. The distinction had saved him from several bad decisions and one almost catastrophic investment in 2019 that he had walked away from at the last possible moment because the founder's pitch had been too smooth and Elijah had learned over 18 years to be suspicious of smoothness that had no friction underneath it. He had been married to Diane for 9 years. She was 40, worked in corporate communications at a healthcare company downtown, smart and composed, and in their early years, the person who had made the apartment they shared feel like something more than a place where he kept his things. He had loved her. He still did, in the way you love something that has become load-bearing in your life, not with daily attention, perhaps, but with the kind of assumption that is its own form of dependency. He had noticed, in the past 8 months, a change in the quality of her presence. Not absence. Presence that was subtly redirected. He had noticed a name that appeared twice in her phone, briefly, on 2 separate evenings when the screen was visible from across the table. He had noticed she had started going to the gym at times that were different from her previous schedule. He had noticed, at a dinner with friends in December, that she had laughed at something she had heard somewhere. A joke, a story. She waved it off when he asked, with a warmth that she had not directed at him in some time. He had filed these things away. He had not decided yet what they meant. He had extended good faith past the evidence, the way he always did in his personal life, even though he would never tolerate it in a deal. He was aware of the inconsistency. He had chosen it deliberately. Then, February, and a Tuesday afternoon, and a man named Brandon Cole walking through his conference room door. The pitch started at 2:03. Cold air came off the window behind Elijah. The building across the street had a glass facade that reflected the white afternoon sky. Brandon Cole set his laptop on the conference table, connected the HDMI cable to the room's display system with the practiced efficiency of someone who had done this specific setup in multiple rooms, and opened the deck. He was a good presenter. Elijah registered that immediately. He had the quality that the best founders have. He did not read from the slides. He used them as prompts and then talked about the underlying reality. His posture was open. His pacing was measured. He had rehearsed enough to be fluent, but not so much that it felt performed. Elijah watched and listened and wrote nothing on the legal pad. Not yet. The business was called Rootflow, logistics software for mid-sized regional distributors, companies too large for spreadsheets and too small for the enterprise-grade platforms that cost more than their annual budgets. The pitch was competent. The market analysis was real. The numbers were not inflated, which Elijah noted because inflated numbers were his clearest early signal for a founder who was more interested in the investment than the company. At the 7-minute mark, Brandon moved to the traction slide. Elijah looked at the revenue figures. He looked at the customer count. He looked at the month-over-month growth line. He tapped his pen once against the legal pad, a habit he had when something required a second look. The numbers were good. Not extraordinary. Good, the kind of good that suggested a real product that real customers were paying real money for, which was, in his experience, far more valuable than extraordinary projections attached to nothing. At the 12-minute mark, Brandon reached the team slide. Elijah looked at the co-founder's name and background. He looked at the advisors listed. He looked at Brandon's own bio, the work history, the prior company, the ember from a school whose program he respected. He looked at the personal photo in the corner of the slide. Standard founder headshot. A professional outdoor shot, somewhere with trees. Brandon Cole, 36, looked like the photo. Then Elijah looked at the photo next to it. It was a small detail, a personal credibility touch. Some founders added a personal photo to show investors a human being, not just a Ursum. This one was a candid shot. Brandon and a woman. A restaurant somewhere, both laughing at something. It was the kind of photo that was meant to say, here is who I am when I'm not pitching. The woman was Diane. Elijah recognized her in the way you recognize your wife of 9 years. The line of her jaw. The way she tilted her head when she was laughing at something she found genuinely funny. The earrings, small gold hoops he had given her for her birthday 3 years ago. He looked at the photo for 1 second, 2. He looked back at Brandon Cole, who was explaining the company's go-to-market strategy with the even confidence of a man who had no idea what had just happened across the table. He did not react. He did not change his posture. He did not set down his pen or clear his throat or look again at the slide. He redirected his attention to Brandon's face with the same steady attention he had given the entire presentation, and he stayed there and he listened. He filed it away. He put it somewhere quiet and precise and did not move it. He would come back to it. Not here. Not now. He wrote 3 words on the legal pad, cleanly, not related to what he had just seen. He let Brandon finish the pitch. 2 years before that Tuesday, Elijah had lunch with a woman named Dorothy Mensah. She was 68 years old, a retired forensic accountant who had spent 22 years working for the SEC before going private, and who now consulted for investment firms on due diligence matters that required someone who had seen every variety of financial dishonesty and was no longer impressed by any of it. She wore reading glasses on a beaded chain. She drank black coffee. She had a habit, when she found something in a set of books that didn't align, of going very still in a way that the people across the table from her had learned to find more alarming than anything she said out loud. Dorothy was not Elijah's partner. She was not on his payroll. She was the person he called when a deal reached the stage where he needed eyes that were better than his on the numbers. He had known her for 11 years. He trusted her with the kind of trust that is not given, it is accumulated, transaction by transaction, over a long time, until you stop checking the work, because you already know it will be right. He called her at 7:18 the following morning from the front seat of his car, parked in the garage beneath his building. Diane was still upstairs. He had left the apartment at 6:50 without waking her, which was not unusual, and had sat in the car for 28 minutes, doing the thing he always did when a situation needed sorting, letting it be exactly what it was, without reshaping it to be more comfortable. "Dorothy," he said when she answered, "I have something that isn't a deal. I need your discretion first." "You always have my discretion," she said. "What is it?" he told her. Concisely. The pitch, the photo, the name. 9 years of marriage. 8 months of small, filed-away signals. He told it in the order it had occurred, without editorializing the way he presented information to his partners when he needed them to see something clearly. Dorothy was quiet through all of it. When he finished, she was quiet for another few seconds. "The business," she said. "Rootflow, you said the financials looked real." "They did." "Did he leave materials?" "The deck. I can get the financials package. Standard follow-up request." "Request the full package," she said. "Standard due diligence language. If there's anything in there that needs to be seen, I will see it." A pause, and separately, "Are you all right?" He looked at the concrete wall of the parking garage. At the oil stain on the floor 3 spaces over that had been there since he moved in. "I'm clear," he said. "That's what I am. I'm clear." She understood what he meant. She did not offer anything he hadn't asked for. "Send me the materials when you have them," she said. "And Elijah. Don't do anything yet." He said he wouldn't. He went upstairs and made coffee and sat at the kitchen table in the apartment where he had lived with his wife for 6 years, and looked at the grain of the tabletop and let the morning come in through the window the way it always did, with the traffic noise from the street below and the smell of the coffee and the ordinary weight of a Tuesday becoming a Wednesday. Diane came out at 7:44. She poured coffee. She said good morning. He said good morning. She sat across from him and looked at her phone. He looked at his coffee. He noticed it again, the quality of her presence, the slight angle of the phone away from the table, the brief smile at something on the screen that she did not share with him. He filed it away. He kept drinking his coffee. He didn't move fast. that was the thing his partners at the firm had always said about him. In an industry that rewarded speed, Elijah Callaway was the person who slowed down. Not because he was uncertain, because he had learned, over 18 years of evaluating opportunities, that the things you couldn't see from a distance always appeared once you stopped moving. He sent the follow-up email to Brandon Cole at 9 a.m. on Wednesday. Standard language. Interested in exploring further, please send the full financials package typical due diligence timeline. He had sent this exact email 40 times a year for 11 years. It was not a lie. It was a protocol. The protocol was real. What he did with the results might be different from what Brandon expected. Dorothy called on Friday. She had the financials. She had gone through them the way she went through everything, completely in order, looking for the place where something broke. The business is real, she said. The numbers hold. The customer contracts are legitimate. He waited. However, she said, he picked up his pen. The capitalization table has an interesting feature. She described it in the measured, factual way she described everything. Brandon Cole held 61% of the company. His co-founder held 22%. The remaining 17% was in a holding entity, an LLC registered in Georgia 18 months ago. The LLC's registered agent was a law firm. The beneficial owner was not listed in the materials Brandon had provided. Standard? Elijah asked. Not for a seed stage company asking for primary capital. At this stage, investors typically want the cap table clean. Unexplained equity held in a non-disclosed entity is a flag. Can you identify the beneficial owner? I can. A pause that had the quality of a pause before something significant. The LLC is called De Ventures. It was registered on September 14th. The beneficial owner, filed with the Secretary of State's office through an amended registration last month, is listed as Diane Harrington Callaway. He put the pen down. He looked at the legal pad. He had written, at the top of the page in the 47 minutes between Brandon's photo and the end of the pitch, 3 words that he now looked at differently. Lean, real, disciplined. He had meant them about the business. They were still true about the business. They were not true about the situation the business was sitting inside. He picked up the pen. He set it back down. How much equity in dollar terms, he said, if the two. $4 million is deployed at the valuation he presented, Dorothy told him. He looked at the wall. At exit, he said, at his projected valuation in 5 years, her position would be worth between $800,000 and $2 million, Dorothy said, depending on the multiple. The room was quiet. She put no capital in, he said. It was not a question. None listed, Dorothy said. The LLC was formed after the company was already incorporated. The equity appears to have been gifted. He stood. He walked to the window. The city was doing what it always did, moving, indifferent, carrying on without comment. He stood over everything in his mind the way he stood over a deal's full documentation before a final decision, not looking at any piece separately, looking at all of it together. The 8 months, the gym schedule, the name on her phone, the birthday earrings in a photograph on a pitch deck, the LLC, the equity. He could see the entire structure of it. It was not complicated. It was actually very simple. His wife had given her boyfriend a 17% stake in his company before bringing that company to ask her husband for investment capital. Whether she had expected Elijah to be the specific investor in the room was a question he would not know the answer to for several more days. What he knew was that the structure was designed to extract value regardless. Either the investment came in and her equity grew, or A different investor funded it, and the same math applied. She had built a position. She had used proximity to him and knowledge of his world to build it. She had been doing it quietly for at least 14 months while living in the apartment 6 floors above his parking garage, sleeping in the bed next to him, pouring coffee across from him in the morning. He thought about due diligence. He thought about the founders he had walked away from because the pitch was too smooth. He thought about his father driving a delivery truck for 31 years with dignity. He called his attorney. Elijah arrived at the offices of Whitmore and Associates at 8:15 on a Monday morning in early March, 40 minutes before the meeting was scheduled to begin. He liked arriving early. He liked a room before anyone else was in it. The conference suite was on the 16th floor, pale walls, a long table in pale wood, a view north toward the highway interchange, the city spreading out under a grey-white March sky. Elijah sat at the far end of the table with a glass of water and his legal pad and looked at the view without particularly seeing it. His attorney, Gerald Whitmore, arrived at 8:30, a tall, steady man of 61, with the particular quality of someone who had been in rooms like this enough times that the room itself held no information for him anymore. He had reviewed everything Dorothy had prepared. He had the documents. He had reviewed the discovery materials from Elijah's filing. He set his briefcase on the table and sat down and said good morning, and that was all. Dorothy arrived at 8:40. She sat to Elijah's right. She had a folder. She poured herself water. She did not speak. Diane arrived at 9:02. She came in with her attorney, a man Elijah had never met, younger than he'd expected, with a look of someone who had been briefed but not entirely prepared. She looked at Elijah when she entered. He looked back. He did not change his expression. She sat across from him. Brandon Cole was not in the room. He had not been invited. That had been deliberate. Gerald opened the meeting with the quiet efficiency of a man billing by the hour who believes in spending that hour productively. He noted the proceedings. He turned to the documents. Dorothy placed the first page on the table. The LC registration. Ventures. Diane Harrington Calloway, beneficial owner. Diane's attorney looked at it. He had seen it before. His expression remained professional. Dorothy placed the second document, the cap table from the Rootflow Financials package, as submitted to Calloway Capital for investment consideration. The 17% allocation to the LLC, held by a beneficial owner undisclosed at time of pitch. Gerald spoke. His voice was even and factual. He explained what the document represented. He explained what the legal exposure was. He explained the timeline. He did not rush. He did not add drama to information that had plenty of its own. Diane looked at the document. Then, at Elijah. He met her gaze across the pale wood table. He looked at her the way he looked at every investment that had not performed the way it should have, with the specific attention of a man who is trying to understand exactly where the structure had gone wrong, so he would know how to build better the next time. He held that look for a moment. He looked back at Gerald. Gerald continued. By the third document, a communication log Dorothy had compiled from materials obtained through discovery, showing the timeline of the LLC's formation relative to Rootflow's incorporation and the Calloway Capital introduction. Diane's attorney had set his pen down and leaned toward his client and was speaking quietly. Gerald paused and allowed the consultation. Elijah looked at the table. He picked up his water glass. He set it down. He looked at the view north through the window, the highway interchange, the March sky, the city going about its business. When Diane's attorney sat back and nodded at Gerald to continue, the room went through a particular kind of still. The kind that doesn't happen in arguments. the kind that only happens when a structure that someone spent a long time building has just been shown exactly where its foundation was wrong. Elijah stood when it was finished. He shook Gerald's hand. He thanked Dorothy, not with excess, just clearly, because she had earned it. He walked to the door. He stopped. He turned back. Diane was looking at him. She had the expression of someone composing themselves, the specific set of a face that is trying to look like it is feeling less than it is feeling. He looked at her for a moment. "I hope he's worth it," he said. Quietly, no performance, no weight added to it beyond what it already had. "I mean that." He walked out. He took the elevator down. He crossed the lobby. He pushed through the glass door into the March air, cold and direct, with the smell of the city and something that might have been rain coming. He stood on the sidewalk for a moment, not performing anything, just standing. Then he walked to his car. It did not happen all at once. The legal matter moved the way legal matters move when the documentation is clean and the opposing counsel has correctly assessed that there is not much to contest. The settlement took 11 weeks. Gerald called with updates. Elijah listened and made decisions and signed what needed to be signed and did not revisit any of them. Brandon Cole did not get the investment. Elijah had sent a decline letter in standard language, not the right fit for the fund's current thesis. Best of luck with the raise. On the same Monday morning, the legal proceedings had formally begun. He had written it himself. He had kept it factual and brief. He had signed it and sent it. He did not know whether Brandon understood why. He did not particularly need to know. Rootflow went on to raise a seed round from a different firm 6 months later. Elijah read about it in a deal newsletter he subscribed to. He noted it. He moved on. The business had been real. The numbers had been real. Those facts had not changed. What they had been surrounded by was a different matter, and he had learned over 18 years to keep those two things separate. Dorothy sent him a succulent in a small terracotta pot about a month after the settlement closed. No card, just the plant, with a delivery note that said the shop's name. He set it on the windowsill of his office, the one with the east-facing window that got good morning light. He watered it on Thursdays. He had 12 investments in active portfolio management. A 13th had closed in April. He answered every email from a founder before end of day. He returned calls the same morning. He showed up to board meetings with the documents read and the questions prepared. He hired a new junior associate in May, a young woman named Sade, who had come in for her interview, and, when he asked her what she looked for first in a pitch, had said, "The thing the founder isn't saying." He had written that down after she left and looked at it for a long time. He had offered her the position the following morning. On a clear evening in late April, Elijah was sitting in the chair by the window of his new apartment, smaller than the one he'd shared with Diane, higher floor, a view east that caught the end of the day in a way he had not expected to like as much as he did. He had a glass of water. The city was going through its early spring thing, the light holding longer than it had any right to, making things look more considered than they were. He had spoken to his father that afternoon. His father was retired now, the delivery route long finished, the truck long returned. He lived in the same house in Memphis where Elijah had grown up, and he spoke with the particular unhurried quality of a man who had given a long time to work and was now discovering what he liked to do when work was not the structure of the day. He had asked Elijah how things were going. Elijah had said honestly, "Good, better, actually." His father had made a sound that was recognition and nothing else. He thought about a Tuesday in February and a pitch deck and a small photo in the corner of a team slide. He thought about the specific moment he had recognized her earrings in a photograph and had chosen, in the next breath, to stay seated and listen to a man finish his pitch. He had not been performing calm in that moment. He had been calm. That was the difference. He had learned, over 18 years of evaluating other people's ideas in conference rooms, very much like the one he'd been sitting in, that the most valuable thing he carried into any room was not knowledge or reputation or capital. It was the ability to see clearly, to look at what was actually in front of him and not at what he had decided to see. He had extended that ability to his marriage for too long. He had filed things away when he should have read them. That was on him. He understood that without making it larger than it was. But he had read the room when it mattered. He had sat across from a man who was unknowingly pitching him on funding his own betrayal, and he had listened completely, and he had seen the whole picture, and he had not moved until he was ready. That was still worth something. He finished his water. He looked at the city going dark in the east, the lights beginning to come up, building by building, the way a portfolio builds. Slowly, one sound decision at a time, until one day the aggregate is something worth looking at. He went inside. He checked on the succulent, green, steady on the windowsill where the morning light would find it. He turned off the lamp. He went to his desk and opened the file for the new deal that had come in that afternoon. A founder he hadn't met yet, a problem worth solving, a set of numbers he hadn't read yet, which meant they could still be anything. He picked up his pen. He began to read. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.